My name is Brian Nordyke. I'm an e-commerce manager at Sheridan, and I'm here to talk to you about our e-commerce platforms, which at its heart is designed to help you sell your products directly to consumers. If we go back to 2010, when ebooks were all the rage and print was dead, and we didn't quite fall into that. We didn't believe in all of that, but we certainly recognized that ebooks were definitely a part of the landscape that wasn't going away and an important part of the landscape. So at the heart of this platform was designing to help you, the publisher, sell your ebooks direct to consumer, and since then it's evolved well beyond that. In 2010, we immediately got into the conversion business. So the concept is when you send your title in for printing, let us take those same exact files and produce an ebook for you at the end of the process. Well, what we found out very quickly is that many publishers were engaged in that right away. We've converted hundreds of titles or thousands of titles for hundreds of publishers. But we recognized that very few had the mechanism to sell those ebooks directly to consumers. They had the Amazons and the Barnes & Nobles, but there wasn't a solution or an easy solution to sell the ebooks direct to consumer. And again, that's where we started from. And since then, we've evolved beyond that. So when we talk about our e-commerce solutions, we talk about it in three different buckets. And the first one is conversion, which we've just touched on. We won't really talk about that much today, but if you have questions or needs with that, we're here to help you with that. Reach out to your sales rep. They'll put you in contact with me. And if you have questions about what formats to use, what are your customers looking for, the concept of creating e-first, the idea of creating your content directly for an ebook as opposed to taking existing content and making it into an ebook. But again, we're here to help with that. So if you have any questions or need some guidance with that, again, reach out to your sales rep and they'll put you in contact with us. What we'll talk most about today is this idea of distribution, the idea of selling your content direct to consumers. We're not out here to say this is a replacement for Amazon. Amazon and those types of third-party retailers are a great space to be in. But what we're looking at is many of you have fantastic websites that have drawn your customers to them. And then when it's time to buy the book, a lot of publishers are saying, well, if you're interested, click here, and then you send the customer to a third-party retailer. That's the customer we want to grab a hold of that's sitting on your website, let you go ahead and make that purchase yourself right there on your existing website. We also talk about enrichment. Enrichment is really a part of distribution, and when we talk about enrichment, we're talking about protecting your files, things like DRM or online reading. How do you take your electronic content and protect it from unauthorized use? Okay? We have two distinctly different offerings when we're talking about direct-to-consumer sales, and one is called Publisher Connect, and the other one is Sheridan Connect. Now, a Publisher Connect model is designed for the publisher who already has an existing e-commerce solution that you don't want to steer away from, but you don't have the mechanisms in place to sell ebooks. There's a little bit of technology challenge in selling digital files that you may not have come across just in simply selling print books on your site. On top of that, trying to protect that content is even not necessarily harder, but certainly more expensive. So the Publisher Connect model answers those questions, lets you get into the space in your own existing website using your own current shopping cart to sell protected e-content. That is strictly an ebook solution, and again, it's really designed for the publisher who has a complete solution already, but the one component they're missing is the ability to sell ebooks, and most specifically, and most often, is protected content. And then the second one we'll talk about is Sheridan Connect. That's where we would create for you a second fully branded and hosted website as your bookstore that you can send your consumers to buy not only ebooks, but print books as well. This is where we've really taken off in the last few years, and again, our focus from the beginning has been ebooks. But we've always had the offering of selling your print titles along with it, but it's been fairly rudimentary. Well, in the last few years, we've really focused on the fulfillment piece of the print world. When your customer buys a book, what happens from the time they click on Add to Cart until they have that book in their hand, and how much of that process we can take away from you and automate that as much as possible so that you can focus more on marketing for the content or developing new content as opposed to watching and babysitting the sales as they happen. So that's where we've made great strides in that fulfillment piece. So again, Publisher Connect is this model where you have an existing website where what we do is we supply you with a series of API codes, just some computer codes that your team would inject into your site so that you can sell the ebooks directly from your site using your existing shopping cart. So if we think about who this is a good fit for, one, this is for a publisher who has a very strong e-commerce platform already. Obviously, you have to have the shopping cart in place now, and a very strong site built now, and really that one missing piece is the ebook component. The other piece that makes a good fit for this publisher is someone who has a strong technology department or resources, because there is a bit of work at your end for injecting the API calls and modifying your existing site so that you could do the order fulfillment through for the ebooks. So if we look at what's happening in the back end for a Publisher Connect model, again, on the left-hand side would be your website, your existing website. On the right-hand side would be a website that we would create for you, and it's really think of it as an ebook warehouse or fulfillment site. So all of the transactions happen on your site, and through a series of API calls, you would say, hey, Brian Nordyke just bought an ebook. When he clicks on download, deliver that URL so that he could download the title itself. Again, this is how it looks on the back end. On the front end, this is more what your consumer would see. So again, if we look on the left, this is your existing website. The changes you would make on your end would be to take and change these options here. Like typically before this site started, all they sold was print titles. So they would add an option for these two pieces to say, I want to sell an EPUB file. So when that sale is made, an API call again is sent to a site that we would create, would send the URL back or the link back, so when the consumer clicks on download at the end of the purchase, they're delivered the file. It's just coming from us, and that gives us the option to protect it with DRM. So that's the Publisher Connect. There's not a lot to show you with that because that's really a technology solution, kind of a behind-the-scenes thing where you would modify your site. Much of the features that we'll talk about for the Sheridan Connect model also apply to the Publisher Connect model as well. But the Sheridan Connect model is we'll create for you a standalone site. We will brand it and theme it so that it's very apparent to your customers that it's your site, up to and including your own custom domain name, so that when you send a customer there, it's very apparent that you've just sent them to another portion of your existing site. Some of the key features, and I like to think of these as key features that you would expect to see in just about any good, robust e-commerce platform. So if you're looking to build something or looking elsewhere, these are things that you should be looking for. Down the left-hand side, and not exclusively, are a little more customer-facing features, and down the right-hand side is a little more administration-type features. Ebook downloads, of course, is a must for our site. So at the end of that process, when the customer buys their book, they have to have a mechanism to receive the title. And we don't want the customer to have to go back and wait for their email to have it delivered to them. So at the end of the process, they click on a button and they download the title that they just purchased. Digital rights management has always been important in the ebook world. And that's a very personal decision for the publisher on whether or not you want to protect your content. We offer that, and that's offered on a title-by-title and option-by-option basis, so that in theory you could offer this title protected in an EPUB form and for whatever reason decide not to protect the PDF. Typically no one does that, but it's not uncommon to have certain titles that you wish to protect and some titles that you don't want to protect. Online reading, we'll touch a little bit about that, but that's another option for securing your content, and it's just presented to the consumer in a little different fashion. Rentals is another part of DRM, protecting your content on a time basis. Kind of think of it as a loan so that you can sell your ebooks and they'll expire after 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever you'd like to set it at. And all of those options are under your control. Break your book apart into chapters and sell them as individual pieces as an ebook. The My eLibrary is a section of the site that I'm relatively proud of. And if you go to any e-commerce site, typically in the upper right-hand corner, you see the login button. And that's where it takes you to My Account section. And it tells you all about you and your password settings and your purchase history. We have that same section, but included into that is what we call the My eLibrary, where is housed any title that the customer has purchased where they can go back and re-download within the confines of the DRM that you've set, so that they can log back in, they can buy the book at the office, they can log back in at home on their laptop, sign back in and download the title again from their Mighty library. The last couple, print on demand and warehouse integration, we'll talk about that a little more in depth, but this idea of selling print to consumers in a way that makes it a little more hands-off for you, the publisher, so that there's a couple different options. Print on demand and warehouse integration are something that we're both fully integrated with, so that when your consumer makes the purchase, it happens automatically. The last couple, product previews, series support, and customer reviews, again, things you would hope to see on any good e-commerce platform. The ability to rate content, if as the publisher you so choose to let the consumer do that. Series support, selling your books in groups. You know, you buy this and buy this one, buy them as a group, or here's an entire series of titles that you can buy in one fell swoop. Excuse me. Down the right-hand side, again, is a little more administration features. Tax calculation and reporting and credit card clearing is a big piece of this for many of the consumers, or many of the publishers, I'm sorry. That's something that we take care of on the site itself. So we would collect the money from the credit card, clear the credit card, process that, take care of all the tax calculation, all the tax collection and remittance, and then at the end of each month, we just send you your take of the proceeds. Coupon support, again, if you're like most people, and my wife especially, if she buys anything online, the first thing she does is there a coupon out there for it? We have an extremely robust coupon support on our site that lets you, the publisher, create any type of coupon you want. Buy one, get one free, 10% off, right down to a very specific coupon for a very specific person for a very specific book. So as narrowly focused as you want it to be, and as widely focused as you want it to be. We have a lot of customers who use coupon support as a member discount, as opposed to going through a full-fledged membership authentication process, giving their members an authorization code so that the content they buy is already reduced in price. Categorizing, again, and tagging and search capabilities so that your customers can find your content on the site. Publisher customization, that goes back to the idea that we'll theme this site out so that it's very apparent to your customer that this is your site, not a Sheridan site or a bank site. Support resources for customers. This is really more of an ebook answer, if you will, because still there's a lot of questions around ebooks direct to consumers. I always like to say that Amazon kind of messed this up for everybody else because they own the sale. They also own the hardware. So when you go to Amazon, you buy a book, poof, it's magically on your device because they own both pieces. Well, when you sell electronic content direct to consumers, you have to help with that process. So there's a lot of questions about ebooks for many consumers. So these are questions that we've seen over and over in the last 5 years. So we build the site right out with a very robust FAQ, support pages, documentation, screenshots of just about anything you can think of. And then we tailor that down to your specific needs. If as a publisher you only want to offer EPUBs, we'll strip out all references to PDF, that type of thing. Sales reporting and Google Analytics, one of the benefits of selling direct to consumer is the data. We consider this your site, your data. So all the information that's collected by you, by the site for the customer, for the sale, is available to you at any given time, including sales metrics, ad hoc, go onto the site and run a series of reports, or you can wait at every month. We'll send you a report of all the activity that's happened. We also integrate to Google Analytics. Sales reporting is really narrowly focused on here's the books that sold and who bought them. Google Analytics goes a little bit further and talks more about traffic. Where did that customer come from? Did they get to the site because of a promotion you did? Did they find it on Google? How long were they on the site? What kind of bounce rate do you receive? What devices did they use when they bought the book? Those types of metrics are available. Bulk ordering, when we talk about ebooks, when you talk about print books, the idea of bulk ordering is relatively straightforward. I want 10 books, ship me 10 books. When you talk about I want 10 ebooks for whatever reason, that's a little different scenario. And if you think of trying to mail somebody 10 of the same Excel file, it doesn't make sense. Where we see that is in administration for like schools. Maybe there's someone in the front office who needs to buy 30 copies for the office or 30 copies for a set of students. We have a mechanism that allows one person to buy multiple ebooks, and then they return a number of authorization codes that they pass out to those consumers to say, here's your code, go to this site and pick up your book. And then tiered pricing and membership authentication, to where we can hook into your current membership authentication process so that when a customer comes to the site, logs in, recognizes them as a member, and they'll be presented with membership pricing. Questions? So fulfillment options. So this is what happens after the consumer makes that purchase. That's kind of the easy part. They've clicked on the button, and now we need to get it into their hands. We have a number of options for that. First of all, the ebook portion of it. How do you get that into their hands? And again, we wanted to stay away from this idea, buy the book and then sit and wait by your email and we'll send you something or we'll send the book to you. So we have that My eLibrary section that we talked about, as well as the ability to protect content. And we'll talk in the next slide specifically what that means to you as the publisher and what that means to the consumer as well when you purchase protected content in an ebook format. Online reading, again, we'll touch on that in the slide after that, which again is another option for selling your content to customers and protecting it without having the consumer to do quite the steps they'll need for a DRM protected EPUB file. The last three deal with selling print titles, and again, we'll have slides for each of these, but Sheridan Print on Demand have a solution where you actually have zero inventory in stock. And when Brian buys your book, a signal is sent and say, hey, print one for Brian, ship it to him, and then send the signal back to the site and update. And oh, by the way, send Brian an email and tell him his book is on the way. Third-party warehouse is the same concept, except the book already resides in a warehouse. And again, fully automated integration so that your book's sitting in a warehouse. A customer makes the purchase, the signal is sent, and the order is processed, again, hands off to you. And the last one is actually the first one, because this is where we started from, and that's a publisher warehouse. That's for the publisher who maybe already is distributing books out their back door. And we have a couple of those who literally, hey, Brian bought a book, they print off the sheet and they go back to the warehouse and they ship it to them. Well, we can integrate to that right out of the box. Just, we can send an email to wherever you want to say somebody just bought a book and use whatever mechanism you already have in place to make that happen. So digital rights management, excuse me, I'm sorry. What it means to sell protected content to your consumer in an ebook download format. We use Adobe Content Servers and Services that allows you to sell your book to an individual. DRM is something that happens at time of purchase. It isn't something that happens to the file itself. You don't actually modify the file. It's something that happens at purchase, which makes it an option that you can turn on and off. That's why you can protect this book and not that book. And oh, by the way, we've protected this book and we found that to be a problem, or we decided to change our minds, so we'll just unclick that button and we'll no longer sell that as protected content. What that means to you and the consumer is a DRM protected ebook creates an ownership between the person who bought the book and the book itself. So again, Brian bought the book now belongs to Brian, and I can't share it with Joe or with someone else. And the way that happens is through an Adobe ID. So I have to have a mechanism to say I'm Brian and be able to tell my software who I am, and I use that through an Adobe ID. So now I have to have a piece of software that's compatible with my Adobe ID, and there's a couple options. The two most famous are Adobe Digital Editions and then Bluefire. So right off the bat, we're restricting the publisher, the customer, as far as what they have to use to read your title. So it's done with very specific software. What that means to you, really what you're getting when you protect your content, is the consumer can download the title up to 6 different devices. And again, that's different to say that you can sell it to 6 different people. This book still belongs to me, and these 6 different devices have to be my devices that I've authorized with my Adobe ID. I can't copy or transfer those to anybody else. I have to gain acquisition of the actual ebook by downloading the file directly on the device I want, and they can't be shared with other users. This always brings up a big conversation of whether or not publishers want to protect their content or don't want to protect their content. And that's really a very individual decision to make. I tried to inject myself into that conversation into one of my very first customers and laid it out as very black and white. If you don't protect the content, are you going to lose sales? If you protect content, are you going to lose sales? And they set me straight right away and said, well, it's much deeper for them. They were having content pirated from them long before ebooks came along. And they have, matter of fact, it's Record Research. There's a gentleman who collects thousands and thousands of data about all the records out there that have ever been published. It's an amazing catalog of information. And people have always been out trying to gather that information and repurpose it for them. And they said it's really more a case of, I don't want to say a case of pride, but there's customers or people out there who are taking their content and repurposing it on the internet or a variety of different purposes, people who are never going to buy their book. So their protection really wasn't about sales. It was about protecting their content from getting out to other places. So the only point there is this is a very personal decision. My job and our job here is to give you as much information as possible, to say, hey, what does that mean to you? And what does that mean to your customer? And then let you make the decision on how you want to proceed. On that note, we have recognized that downloading a protected file requires your customer to do steps A, B, C, and D, as opposed to it would be great if here's your book, read your e-file, and then stop them from doing something, prevent them from doing something you don't want to happen. Well, instead, it's the opposite. They have to do these steps in order to gain access to the content. And that can be problematic for some customers who have problems walking through that process. And again, the idea the publishers want to make this as easy as possible. For some, this is just the answer that needs to happen. And again, we go back to the support tools that we provide on the site with some very step-by-step instructions on what it takes to download the file, what the consumer has to do to read the file themselves. But we were always on the lookout for, is there a better mousetrap? Is there something better here? Well, we looked at, oddly enough, online reading, whose main purpose has really nothing to do with DRM. But we looked at it in a little different vein as an answer to DRM. This will allow your customers to read your content immediately after purchase without having to do anything other than click a button and says, I want to read my book. They don't have to download any software. They don't have to have an Adobe ID. The requirement is they have to log into your site and click on the button that says, I want to read my title now. It's protected really in the same fashion as a print book is. There's one of them exists. It just exists in the cloud. Now, whether or not they access it from their laptop, they go to the public library and log in and access it, it still is one single title that can only be accessed one at a time. I guess in theory they could give their information to somebody else and let them read it, but it would be very much similar to loaning you my print title, because now you have it and I can't have it. So it's a very single copy. Implemented this a year ago, and I haven't checked my numbers because I've been watching this closely in the last month, but I believe probably as of yesterday we hit 10,000 users who have purchased titles using online reading. It's really taken off because it's a very simple solution for the end consumer, which makes life easier for the publisher as well. So if we look at, these are things we already talked about, the graphical representations of this order fulfillment. So this is what happens when you buy a book on a site, and we use your existing fulfillment options where you go to the back room and just send one out. Literally what we do is we send an email to wherever you want it to go. Here's all the information. Brian just bought a book, and here's a shipping address, and we'll just send it to wherever you want in real time. Here's an email that says, ship this book out. Semi-automated, but not really. That's where that process ends. You still need notification to the customer that it's shipped. And even on the site, you'll want to come back and mark that title or this order that it is actually shipped. So the only automated process here is just letting you know someone bought a print book that needs to ship. Integrating with a warehouse is where things really kind of got cool and where it really eliminates your need to really get involved in the process too much unless a customer has a question about their order. The idea is that a consumer comes to the site and makes a purchase. We'll send a feed to our warehouse, or if you have a warehouse that you want us to connect with, we can do that as well. And the order is automatically sent to the warehouse where it's picked, packed, and shipped. A feed is sent back to the Sheridan Connect site. That order is automatically updated. An email is automatically sent out to your customer with the shipping information. Hey, Brian, your book is shipped, and here's your tracking number if you want to follow it along. Very similar process for our print-on-demand facility in Pennsylvania. Process is the same, except we'll send the order down as they happen to our facility, where they're actually printed first and then bound and then shipped out to the consumer. A feed is sent back to the site again. Order is updated automatically, and an email is sent out to the consumer that says your book is shipped and here's your tracking information. So this allows for a zero inventory, literally, to where you'll print a book only after it's been sold. Screen grabs of things we've already talked about, Google Analytics and reporting. The information, again, is available to you as the owner of the site, so you can go in at any given time and see what type of traffic you've had, whether it's through sales metrics or Google Analytics. So if we think about this Shared and Connect concept where you have someone sitting on your site and you want to sell them a book, picture on the left is your existing site and your existing store. You'll just create a link to say when you want to buy a book, click here and send them to your bookstore, which is a store that we would create for you that would mimic your existing site with your branding, again, so the consumer recognizes that they're still on your site. Homepage where you can list all of your pieces of content, categorize them any number of ways by author, by subject, put your own custom content available, and oh, by the way, we can sell really pretty much anything. It doesn't have to be an ebook or a print title. We have customers who sell coffee mugs. The product pages, individual product pages, are built out, again, so you can send your consumers either to that home page, if you will, go to our bookstore and buy our books, or they're sitting on a page where they obviously have a very particular interest in this title, send that individual to the product page itself, where we build the title out with a variety of metadata, purchase options. In this case, you can see membership pricing, and then down the bottom, some of the other existing information. We'll go out and look at a site and show this in real time. Easy to use administration tools. Again, this is your site. You'll have complete access to it through a series of administration tools where you can become as involved in the administration process of the site as you want or as little as you want. We have some customers who are very comfortable with this and kind of get out of my way. You just give me the keys and off they go. And it's always fun to go to those sites next week and say, oh, they've changed things. Some customers, yeah, I don't want anything to do with that. Can you do this for us? And we're happy to do whatever you want anywhere in between. We'll take the reins fully, or again, we'll get out of the way. But typically it's a mixture of the two. But things like changing prices, doing special promotions, creating new page banners and that type of thing. So what I'd like to do now is just briefly jump out and look at a couple of examples. So here's a product page, and I chose this one because this customer has chosen a lot of options and they use a lot of the tools available to them. Again, we have a thumbnail of the cover, title, subtitle, author information. All the metadata you see here is optional, whatever options they want to choose, what they want to display or not display, a series of ISBN numbers and publication date. Cross-promoting, this belongs in this series, and if you click on that, it'll show you other titles that belong there as well. We have a couple different options for that look inside the book feature. We have an actual fly out where it'll pop up on screen and display the number of pages that you want to have the consumer read. This customer has actually chosen for downloadable PDF files. So when you click on view sample pages, the consumer actually gets a PDF of 6 sample pages. Added some custom content below the add to cart button, offering the title as an ebook, a print book, and a bundled option at a reduced price. And again, all of these options are for the publisher to set, including the pricing. Down the bottom, we have some existing information or additional information. This data shows up as needed, so you don't have a bunch of empty tabs along the bottom. But if you choose to add information about the author, a tab is automatically created. And again, these are customizable. This publisher has additional details about the title itself, information about the creators or the authors. Some author bios. They've added a tab to display a table of contents. External reviews that they've added. You can also add the option for internal reviews, like customer reviews, so customers can come in and rate the titles. That's very different than, this is like an editorial review. They've chosen to turn that mechanism off, but you can, if you want, allow customer reviews, and as soon as one is available, that tab would populate. And oh, by the way, those pass through the publisher first, so people can't comment on your titles without it going through an approval process. And then a similar item, the idea that, hey, you like this, you may also like that. Let's go down a little bit. So again, just links to similar items. So again, you like this, you may also like that. One more site I want to show you, and this site I like for a very different reason. This site was built to solve a very particular problem that the publisher presented to us. This publisher has 3 front title lists that sell pretty rapidly and a pretty good clip. They also have a half a dozen backlist titles that don't sell very often. And they have a variety of different numbers of those in inventory. Some of them, they have 50 books left, some they have 500 books left, and they may never sell. Again, the front list titles sell at a pretty good clip. They're all sitting in their warehouse today, and they administer that completely. That was the problem they wanted to solve. They wanted to get out of that. They wanted to focus on creating new content or marketing this content and not be bogged down with the day-to-day of somebody bought a book, going to the back room and shipping it out, keeping tracks on inventory, when do we need to print again. So solution for them, one, and they wanted to add ebooks. That was the easy part. So some titles have ebooks available, and again, that was the easy part. So what we've done for this particular customer is, right now there's a couple of titles. Their backlist titles are still sitting in their warehouse. As those deplete, they'll never print those again. So as soon as one of those titles get down to 0, we'll automatically flip that over to print on demand. So when those 50 titles are gone, they're gone for good, and they'll only print them as they sell. And again, they don't sell that many of them, so it's a perfect option for those titles. So again, they're sitting in their warehouse. They will transition those into our warehouse eventually, so to take that off their lap as well. So we have print titles that are diminishing in inventory, and when they run out, they'll transition to print on demand. Their front list titles, they print too many of those. They sell too many of them, so a print on demand solution isn't economical for them. But the same idea. So those are currently sitting in their warehouse. On the next reorder from us, we will just keep the books. We'll print the titles for them, and I think we've printed 1 of the 3 already, and those titles will just sit in our warehouse. So taking that off their lap. So as those 3 titles print each time newly, they'll be in our warehouse, so the eventual goal is they won't have anything in their warehouse. So once those 3 front title lists have all reprinted and reside in our warehouse, they'll just ship over all those backlist titles and take everything off of their lap completely. So again, this was a very real solution to their existing problem of they're relatively small, but they're in so much as that their staff really was devoting too much time to a sale that had already happened. I bought the book, now they have to do all this work to get it into my hands. The other unique solution that they opted for that we talked about briefly is bulk purchases of ebooks. They definitely have a need for someone to be able to buy 50 ebooks and distribute those out to other people. So they can buy any of these titles that are available in ebook format and buy 10 of those, 50 of those. They're returned 50 authorization codes that they then pass out to those 50 individuals who need the title. They're directed to the site where you can't see it because it's all whited out, but there's actually an input box right here that, because the screen is washed out on the display, where the consumer enters their authorization code, automatically drops them into the shopping cart and lets them complete their purchase. So the implementation process, it's a very collaborative effort. Once you decide, hey, this is a good solution for us and we want to move forward, where do we go from here? Again, it's a very, very collaborative effort. This is your site. This is your content. One, you have to supply us with that information and that content. But again, we want to make certain it looks and feels and acts exactly how you want it to go. So first thing we'll do is set up a kickoff meeting where our team and your team all get together and we walk through exactly what does this process look like. What is it that we're going to be doing in the next 4 to 6 weeks? What is your part? What is my part? What do those parts intermix? And what are our milestones along the way? Define things like who's doing what, who on your team will do what, who on my team will do what. Once we have that set in stone, we move into this definition stage. We start gathering all this information we just talked about, collecting all your metadata, collecting all your assets, cover files, ebook files, and then using that information to install and create your site. And then from there we move into testing and launch. We always like towards the end of the process, we think it's a great idea if you were to enlist someone on your team who not involved in any of this front end part to say, hey, go out here and make a purchase, see what this looks like. We've tested it and will continue to test it to make certain that when I click this button, it does what it's supposed to do. We'd like you to test it to say, yes, but I'm not sure I really like that button. And, maybe we could do something else there instead. So that type of testing. And then from there, training, you'll have complete training on the site. That's really an evolution process. Training begins on this first week meeting. And then carries on to the life of the site. We'll never walk away from you, but there is at least one point in the process where we'll gather your team together, whoever you want, in whatever format you want, and walk through, here's all the things you need to know about the site, here's how you access the site, here's the administration tools, and we'll give you documentation for that as well. And then, again, that support continues on forever. We're here whenever you need, whatever you need for the life of the site.